Mother Bear took over the nurse's station to warm a chilled baby. What happened next was shocking. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The night shift at Pine Valley Medical Center felt different that Tuesday. Nurse Riley Chen couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong as she walked down the dimly lit hallway toward the nursery. Her soft-soled shoes made barely a whisper against the cold linoleum floor. The old heating system had been acting up all week, and tonight it finally gave up completely. Baby Mia Thompson lay in her tiny hospital crib, her small body trembling despite the 3 blankets wrapped around her. She was only 2 days old, born premature at 34 weeks. Her parents had gone home for a few hours of rest, trusting the hospital staff to keep their precious daughter safe and warm. But the broken heater had turned the nursery into an icebox. Riley pulled her cardigan tighter as she checked the thermostat again. 52 degrees. Way too cold for any baby, especially one so small and fragile. She had called maintenance twice already, but they wouldn't arrive until morning. The portable heaters were all being used in other parts of the hospital. "Come here, sweet girl," Riley whispered, gently lifting baby Mia from her crib. The infant's skin felt like ice against her palms. "Let's get you somewhere warmer." She carried the baby toward the nurse's station, where at least the computer equipment gave off some heat. The hallway seemed endless, filled with shadows that danced in the emergency lighting. Riley had worked night shifts for 8 years, but tonight felt different. The silence was too thick, too heavy. As she settled into her chair at the nurse's station, cradling baby Mia against her chest, she noticed something odd. The back door to the hospital, the one that led to the staff parking area, was slightly open. A thin line of cold air slipped through the crack, carrying with it the scent of pine trees and something else. Something wild. Riley frowned. She was sure that door had been locked when she started her shift. Security guard Marcus Webb always did his rounds at exactly 10 o'clock, and he never left doors unlocked. But Marcus had called in sick tonight, leaving the hospital with minimal security coverage. Baby Mia stirred in her arms, making soft whimpering sounds that tugged at Riley's heart. The infant's lips had a slight blue tinge that worried her. She needed to get this baby warm and fast. The sound of heavy breathing made Riley freeze. It wasn't coming from baby Mia, it was deeper, rougher, like something much larger struggling in the cold. Riley's heart began to race as she looked around the empty nurse's station. The breathing seemed to be coming from the direction of the open door. Suddenly, a massive shadow appeared in the doorway. Riley's breath caught in her throat as she saw what looked like the outline of an enormous animal. Her mind couldn't process what she was seeing. This was a hospital, not a zoo. Animals didn't just wander into medical facilities. But as the shadow moved closer, Riley realized with growing terror that this was no ordinary animal. It was a bear, a massive brown bear with thick fur matted from the cold mountain air. The bear's dark eyes reflected the dim light from the nurse's station as it slowly, carefully stepped into the hallway. Riley wanted to scream, wanted to run, but baby Mia was in her arms. She couldn't move without risking dropping the fragile infant. All she could do was sit perfectly still and pray that the bear would turn around and leave. The bear paused in the doorway, its massive head tilting as if listening to something. Then Riley realized what had caught its attention. Baby Mia was crying softly, her tiny voice barely audible but clearly distressing to the enormous animal standing just 20 feet away. What happened next would change everything Riley thought she knew about the world. The bear didn't charge forward like Riley expected. Instead, it moved with surprising gentleness, its massive paws making almost no sound on the hospital floor. Riley watched in complete shock as the animal approached the nurse's station with what could only be described as concern in its dark, intelligent eyes. Baby Mia's crying grew a little louder, her tiny fists waving in the air as she struggled against the cold that seemed to seep through every blanket. The bear stopped just 3 feet from Riley's chair, close enough that she could smell its wild scent and see the frost clinging to its thick brown fur. Riley's training kicked in despite her terror. She knew she should press the emergency button, call for help, do something to protect herself and the baby, but something in the bear's behavior stopped her. The animal wasn't showing any signs of aggression. Its ears weren't pinned back, its teeth weren't bared. Instead, it seemed to be studying Baby Mia with an expression that looked almost like worry. "Please don't hurt us," Riley whispered, her voice barely audible. "She's just a baby." The bear's head turned toward Riley at the sound of her voice, and for a moment their eyes met. Riley felt her breath catch as she saw something unexpected in those dark depths. Pain, loss, a deep, aching sadness that seemed to mirror her own fears about the vulnerable infant in her arms. Then the bear did something that made Riley question her sanity. It lay down on the cold hospital floor, positioning its massive body in a protective circle around Riley's chair. The warmth from its thick fur immediately began to chase away the chill that had been making Baby Mia shiver. Riley felt the temperature around them rise almost instantly. The bear's body heat was like a natural furnace, warming the air in a way that the broken hospital heater never could. Baby Mia's crying began to soften as the warmth reached her tiny body. "This can't be happening," Riley murmured, looking down at the bear that had somehow transformed from a terrifying threat into an unlikely protector. Bears don't act like this. They don't just help people. But as she watched, the bear carefully adjusted its position, making sure that the warm air from its breathing was directed toward the baby. Its massive head rested on its front paws, eyes never leaving Baby Mia's small form. Riley's radio crackled to life, making her jump. "Riley, this is Dr. Patricia Vance in the ER. How's everything in the nursery? I heard the heating system is completely down." Riley stared at her radio, then at the bear, then back at the radio. How could she possibly explain what was happening? Who would believe that a wild bear had somehow entered the hospital and was now acting as a living heater for a premature baby? "Riley, are you there?" Dr. Vance's voice came through the static again. "I'm here," Riley managed to say, keeping her voice as steady as possible. "The baby is, she's warmer now. I found a solution to the heating problem." The bear's ears twitched at the sound of the radio, but it didn't move from its protective position. If anything, it seemed to settle in more comfortably, as if it had every intention of staying exactly where it was. "Good. I'll be up to check on you both in about an hour. The replacement heating unit won't arrive until tomorrow morning, so keep doing whatever you're doing." Riley set down the radio with shaking hands. An hour. Dr. Vance would be here in an hour, and would find her sitting next to a massive bear like it was the most normal thing in the world. But as she looked down at Baby Mia, who had finally stopped shivering and was now sleeping peacefully in the warm air created by their unlikely guardian, Riley realized she didn't want the bear to leave. The bear seemed to sense her thoughts. It lifted its great head and looked directly at Riley, and she could swear she saw understanding in those dark eyes. Understanding and something else. Recognition, as if the bear knew exactly who she was and why she was there. Riley's mind raced back to the nature documentaries she'd watched as a child. Bears were supposed to be dangerous, unpredictable, driven by hunger and territorial instincts. They weren't supposed to be capable of the kind of gentle protection she was witnessing. Unless A chill ran down Riley's spine as a terrible thought occurred to her. What if this bear had lost something? What if it was driven not by aggression, but by the same protective instinct that made Riley want to keep baby Mia safe? She studied the bear more carefully, noticing details she had missed in her initial terror. There were scratches on its shoulders, as if it had been digging or searching frantically. Its fur was matted not just from frost, but from what looked like hours of desperate movement through the forest. And there was something in its eyes, a grief so profound that it made Riley's heart ache. "You lost your cub, didn't you?" Riley whispered, the words slipping out before she could stop them. The bear's reaction was immediate and heartbreaking. Its massive body seemed to sag, and a sound emerged from its throat that was part whine, part moan. It was the sound of a mother in pain, a sound that transcended species and spoke directly to Riley's own maternal instincts. Baby Mia stirred in her arms, making soft cooing sounds as the warmth continued to surround her. The bear's attention immediately returned to the infant, and Riley saw its expression change from grief to something that looked like hope. The pieces began to fall into place in Riley's mind. This wasn't just a random encounter with a wild animal. This was a mother who had lost her own baby and had somehow found another infant in need of protection. The bear's instincts had led it to baby Mia, just as Riley's instincts had led her to become a nurse. But that raised new questions that made Riley's stomach clench with worry. Where was the bear's cub? What had happened to it? And more importantly, what would happen when other people discovered what was happening in the nurse's station? As if summoned by her thoughts, Riley heard footsteps in the hallway. Someone was coming, and they would be here in less than a minute. Riley looked at the bear, who had also heard the approaching footsteps and was beginning to tense. "Please don't hurt anyone," Riley whispered urgently. "They're just trying to help." The footsteps grew closer, and Riley realized with growing dread that she was about to discover whether her unlikely protector was truly as gentle as it seemed, or whether the approaching person would trigger the wild animal's defensive instincts. Baby Mia's life, and possibly several others, hung in the balance of what happened next. The bear's ears pricked forward, and its massive body tensed as the footsteps echoed down the hallway. Riley could feel the animal's muscles coiling beneath its thick fur, preparing for whatever might come. She held baby Mia closer to her chest, torn between wanting to protect the infant and not wanting to make any sudden movements that might startle their guardian. "Riley? Are you still at the nurse's station?" The voice belonged to Jake Morrison, the night janitor who had been working at Pine Valley Medical Center for over 20 years. His familiar footsteps had a slight limp from an old injury, a sound Riley had grown accustomed to during her years of night shifts. Riley's heart pounded as she realized Jake would round the corner in seconds. She opened her mouth to warn him, but the bear moved first. Instead of standing or showing aggression, it did something that left Riley speechless. The massive animal carefully shifted its position, moving its body so that it was less visible from the hallway entrance while still maintaining its protective circle around Riley and baby Mia. The bear was hiding. A 700-pound wild animal was actually trying to hide to avoid frightening someone. "Jake, wait!" Riley called out, her voice cracking with tension. "Don't come over here right now." Jake's footsteps paused. "Everything okay, Riley? You sound strange." Riley looked down at the bear, whose dark eyes were fixed on her face with an expression of trust that took her breath away. This incredible animal was depending on her to keep it safe, just as she was depending on it to keep baby Mia warm. "I'm fine," Riley said, trying to keep her voice steady. "It's just, there's a situation here that's hard to explain. The baby is safe and warm, but I need you to trust me and stay in the main hallway for now." There was a long pause. Riley could picture Jake standing in the hallway, his weathered face creased with concern. He had been like a father figure to many of the nurses over the years, always looking out for them during the lonely night shifts. "Riley, you're scaring me," Jake said finally. "If something's wrong, I should call security or Dr. Vance." "No," Riley said quickly. Perhaps too quickly. "Please, Jake, just give me a few minutes. Everything is under control, I promise." The bear seemed to understand the conversation, even though it couldn't comprehend the words. It had settled back into its protective position, but Riley could see the intelligence in its eyes as it watched her handle the situation. This wasn't just any bear. This animal had a depth of understanding that went beyond normal wildlife behavior. "All right," Jake said reluctantly, "but I'm staying right here in the hallway. If you need anything at all, you just holler." Riley felt a wave of relief wash over her. "Thank you, Jake. I'll explain everything later, I promise." She heard Jake's footsteps retreat slightly, followed by the sound of him settling into one of the chairs in the main hallway. He wasn't leaving, but he was giving her the space she had asked for. Riley had bought herself some time, but she knew it wouldn't last long. Baby Mia had been sleeping peacefully in the warmth provided by the bear, but now she began to stir. Her tiny eyes opened, unfocused but alert, and she made soft gurgling sounds that seemed to fascinate the massive animal watching over her. The bear's reaction to Baby Mia's awakening was extraordinary. It lowered its great head until it was just inches from Riley's lap, and began making soft chuffing sounds that were clearly meant to be soothing. The sound was deep and rhythmic, almost like a lullaby. Baby Mia turned her head toward the sound, her tiny face showing no fear of the enormous creature so close to her. Instead, she seemed calmed by the bear's presence, her small hand reaching out as if trying to touch the thick fur that surrounded them like a living wall. Riley watched in amazement as the bear very carefully, very gently, moved its massive head closer so that Baby Mia's fingers could brush against its snout. The touch was so light it was barely contact at all, but the bear's eyes closed as if the baby's touch had brought it peace. "You really did lose your baby, didn't you?" Riley whispered, tears beginning to form in her eyes. "And now, you're trying to protect this one." The bear opened its eyes and looked at Riley with such profound sadness that she felt her heart break. In that moment, she understood that she wasn't just witnessing unusual animal behavior. She was witnessing grief, loss, and the desperate need to nurture that exists in mothers across all species. Riley's radio crackled again, making both her and the bear tense. "Riley, this is Dr. Vance. I'm running a bit early. I'll be up in about 15 minutes instead of an hour. How's our little patient doing?" 15 minutes. Riley felt panic rise in her chest. There was no way she could explain this situation to Dr. Vance, and there was no way the bear could remain hidden once the doctor arrived for a full examination of Baby Mia. "She's doing much better," Riley managed to say. "The warming method is working perfectly." "Excellent. I'll bring the portable monitors so we can keep a closer eye on her temperature through the night." Riley set down the radio and looked at the bear, whose intelligent eyes seemed to understand that their time together was limited. The animal's ears had flattened slightly, not in aggression, but in what looked like disappointment. "I don't know what to do," Riley admitted quietly. "I can't let them hurt you, but I can't let you stay here either. People won't understand what you're doing." The bear seemed to consider her words, then did something that made Riley's breath catch. It stood up slowly, careful not to disturb the warm air that surrounded Baby Mia, and padded quietly toward the window that overlooked the staff parking lot. Riley watched as the massive animal pressed its nose against the glass, looking out at the forest beyond the hospital grounds. The bear's posture was one of longing, but also of resignation. It knew it had to leave, but it clearly didn't want to abandon the baby it had been protecting. Then Riley noticed something that made her blood run cold. In the parking lot below, illuminated by the security lights, were 3 vehicles she didn't recognize. Dark SUVs with official-looking license plates. As she watched, several people in uniform got out of the vehicles, and she could see they were carrying equipment that looked like tranquilizer guns. Someone had called the authorities. Someone had seen the bear enter the hospital, and now they were here to capture or kill it. Riley's mind raced as she tried to figure out who could have seen the bear. The hospital was isolated, surrounded by forest on 3 sides. The only way someone could have spotted the animal was if they had been watching the building specifically. Then she remembered Jake's radio. All the hospital staff carried radios, and they were monitored by the main security office in town. If Jake had called in to report something unusual, or if he had mentioned the situation Riley had told him about, it might have triggered an emergency response. The bear had seen the vehicles too. It turned away from the window, and Riley saw something in its expression that made her heart sink. The animal knew it was trapped. The people outside would never believe that it had been protecting baby Mia. They would see only a dangerous wild animal that had somehow gotten into a hospital. "No," Riley whispered, standing up carefully with baby Mia still in her arms. "This isn't right. You saved her life. You kept her warm when no one else could. They can't just—" She couldn't finish the sentence. The bear looked at her with those incredibly intelligent eyes, and Riley felt a connection that went deeper than words. This magnificent creature had shown more compassion and protective instinct than many humans she had known, and now it was going to be punished for that kindness. Baby Mia began to fuss as the warm air around them started to cool. The bear immediately moved closer again, but Riley could see the conflict in its movements. It wanted to continue protecting the baby, but it also understood that its presence was putting everyone in danger. The sound of heavy footsteps in the main hallway told Riley that the people from outside had entered the building. She could hear Jake's voice, confused and worried, talking to someone with an authoritative tone. They would be here in minutes, and Riley still had no idea how to protect the bear that had protected baby Mia. Then the bear did something that changed everything. It walked over to Riley's desk and, with surprising gentleness, picked up a pen in its teeth. Riley watched in shock as the animal somehow managed to knock over a stack of papers, revealing the blank incident report form underneath. The bear looked at Riley, then at the paper, then back at Riley. It was trying to communicate something, but Riley couldn't understand what the animal wanted her to do. The footsteps were getting closer, and Riley could hear multiple voices now. Time was running out, and she still had no plan to save the bear that had saved baby Mia's life. But as she looked into those intelligent, trusting eyes, Riley knew she had to try something, anything, to prevent the tragedy that was about to unfold. The bear's behavior with the pen and papers suddenly clicked in Riley's mind. The animal wasn't just randomly moving things around. It was trying to show her something specific. Riley looked more closely at the papers that had been scattered, and her heart nearly stopped when she saw what was underneath them. It was a missing persons report. Not for a person, but for a bear cub. The report had been faxed to the hospital earlier that evening as part of a community-wide alert. A mother bear and her cub had been separated during a forestry operation 3 days ago. The cub had been found injured and taken to a wildlife rehabilitation center, but the mother had disappeared into the mountains. Riley's hands trembled as she read the details. The cub was at Mountain View Wildlife Sanctuary, just 15 miles from the hospital. It was alive, recovering from its injuries, but crying constantly for its mother. The report included a photo of the cub, a small brown ball of fur with distinctive white markings on its chest. The bear at Riley's feet saw her reading the report and made a soft whining sound. Riley looked into those dark eyes and saw hope flickering there like a candle in the wind. "Your baby is alive," Riley whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Your baby is alive and it's waiting for you." The bear's entire body seemed to vibrate with emotion. It stood up slowly, carefully, never taking its eyes off Riley's face. Then it did something that made Riley's breath catch in her throat. The massive animal very gently nuzzled baby Mia's tiny hand with its snout, as if saying goodbye. But their moment was shattered by the sound of heavy boots in the hallway and the unmistakable click of weapons being readied. Riley heard Jake's voice, higher-pitched now with fear and confusion. "I'm telling you." She said everything was fine. "Riley's been working here for 8 years. She's never lied to me before. Sir, we have confirmed sightings of a large brown bear entering this building through the rear entrance. We need to secure the area immediately." The voice belonged to someone with authority, someone who wouldn't be easily convinced to back down. Riley looked at the bear, whose ears had flattened against its head. Not in aggression, but in fear. This powerful, magnificent creature was afraid, and that realization broke something inside Riley's chest. "Listen to me," she whispered urgently to the bear. "I know you can understand more than people think. Your baby is at Mountain View Wildlife Sanctuary. It's north of here, past the old logging road. If you can get out of here alive, you can find your cub." The bear's eyes widened, and Riley could swear she saw understanding there. But how could the animal possibly escape? The authorities were in the hallway, armed and ready. The only exit was the same door the bear had entered through, and that route would take it directly past the armed officers. Then Riley remembered something. The hospital had been built in the 1960s, and like many older buildings, it had a series of maintenance tunnels running beneath it. The tunnels connected to the old coal delivery system and had exits at various points around the hospital grounds. Riley had only been in them once, during a training exercise, but she remembered that one of the access points was in the storage room just down the hall from the nurse's station. "Jake," Riley called out, hoping her voice would carry to the hallway. "I need you to create a distraction. Can you ask the officers to check the East Wing? Tell them you heard something over there." There was a pause, then Jake's voice, confused but trusting. "Riley, what's going on? These people have guns. Please, Jake, just trust me. Someone's life depends on it." Riley heard Jake talking to the officers, his voice growing more animated as he spun some story about hearing noises in the opposite direction from where they actually were. She held her breath, praying that the man who had been like a father to so many of the staff would be able to buy them the time they needed. The bear seemed to understand that Riley was trying to help. It moved closer to her chair, pressing its warm bulk against her side as if offering comfort while they waited to see if Jake's distraction would work. Baby Mia chose that moment to wake up fully, her tiny eyes opening wide as she looked up at the massive animal beside them. Instead of crying, she made a soft cooing sound and reached out her little hand toward the bear's face. The bear's reaction was immediate and heartbreaking. It very carefully lowered its head so that baby Mia could touch its snout, and Riley saw tears actually forming in the animal's eyes. This mother, separated from her own child, was saying goodbye to the baby she had protected. "They're checking the East Wing now," Jake's voice came back, sounding strained. "But they're not going to stay there long. Whatever you're planning, Riley, you need to do it fast." Riley carefully stood up, still holding baby Mia, and moved toward the storage room. The bear followed, staying close enough to keep the baby warm but alert to every sound in the hallway. Riley fumbled with the keys at her belt, trying to find the one that would open the storage room door. The storage room was cramped and filled with medical supplies, but in the far corner was the access panel to the maintenance tunnels. Riley had always thought it looked like something from a horror movie, a dark opening that led to unknown depths beneath the building. "I can't go with you," Riley said to the bear, her voice breaking. "I have to stay with the baby. She needs medical care, and I can't leave her. But you can get out through here. The tunnel will take you to the loading dock, and from there, you can get to the forest." The bear looked at the dark opening, then back at Riley and baby Mia. Its internal struggle was visible in every line of its massive body. It wanted to continue protecting the baby, but it also needed to find its own cub. Then baby Mia did something extraordinary. As if she somehow understood what was happening, she looked directly at the bear and made a sound that wasn't quite a cry and wasn't quite a coo. It was a sound of reassurance, as if she were telling the bear that it was okay to go. The bear's eyes widened at the sound, and it looked at baby Mia with an expression of wonder. Then, very gently, it nuzzled the baby's hand one more time before turning toward the tunnel opening. But as the bear prepared to leave, Riley heard something that made her blood freeze. Dr. Vance's voice in the hallway, talking to the officers. "I don't care what you think you saw. I have a premature infant in this wing who needs immediate medical attention. Your little hunting expedition can wait until I've examined my patient." Dr. Vance was coming, and she wouldn't be deterred by Jake's distractions or the officers' concerns. She would walk straight to the nurse's station, expecting to find Riley with baby Mia, and instead she would find an empty chair and no explanation for where they had gone. Riley realized with growing panic that she had created a new problem by bringing the bear to the storage room. Now she was away from her station with a baby who needed monitoring, and when Dr. Vance arrived to find her missing, it would trigger an even larger search that would inevitably lead to the discovery of the bear. The bear seemed to sense Riley's distress. It paused at the entrance to the tunnel and looked back at her with those incredibly intelligent eyes. Then it did something that left Riley speechless. The bear carefully picked up a medical blanket in its teeth and brought it to Riley. Not just any blanket, but one of the specialized warming blankets used for premature infants. It had somehow recognized that baby Mia needed to stay warm even after it left. "Thank you," Riley whispered, wrapping the warming blanket around baby Mia. "Thank you for everything." The bear nodded, an unmistakably human gesture from a wild animal, and then disappeared into the darkness of the tunnel. Riley heard its heavy footsteps echoing in the underground passage, growing fainter as it moved toward freedom. But Riley's relief was short-lived. As she turned to leave the storage room, she came face to face with someone she hadn't expected to see. Standing in the doorway was Dr. Elena Vasquez, the hospital's chief of staff, holding a tranquilizer gun and wearing an expression that was both determined and deeply sad. "Hello, Riley," Dr. Vasquez said quietly. "I think we need to talk." Riley's mind raced as she tried to process this new development. Dr. Vasquez wasn't supposed to be at the hospital tonight. She lived 40 minutes away and only came in for emergencies. But here she was, armed and clearly aware of what had been happening. "Dr. Vasquez," Riley managed to say, clutching baby Mia closer. "I can explain." "I'm sure you can, Doctor." Vasquez replied, but her voice wasn't angry. Instead, it carried a weight of knowledge that made Riley's stomach clench with dread. "But first, I need you to tell me exactly where the bear went, because what you don't know, Riley, is that this isn't the first time something like this has happened." Riley felt the world tilt beneath her feet. Dr. Vasquez's words implied something impossible, something that challenged everything Riley thought she understood about the night's events. "What do you mean?" Riley asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to hear the answer. Dr. Vasquez lowered the tranquilizer gun and looked at baby Mia, who was sleeping peacefully in the warming blanket the bear had provided. When she looked back at Riley, her eyes were filled with a mixture of compassion and resignation. I mean, this is the third time in 5 years that a bear has entered this hospital to protect a human child. And each time, the bear has been a mother who lost her own cub. But what's happening here isn't natural, Riley. It's something else entirely. Something that's connected to this specific building and the children who are brought here. Riley's legs felt weak. She leaned against the storage room wall, trying to process what Dr. Vasquez was telling her. That's impossible. Bears don't behave like this. They don't just decide to protect human babies. You're right, Doctor, Vasquez said. They don't. Under normal circumstances, what you witnessed tonight would be completely impossible. But Pine Valley Medical Center isn't built on normal ground, Riley. It's built on something much older, something that creates connections between mothers and children that transcend species. The implications of Dr. Vasquez's words hit Riley like a physical blow. If what she was saying was true, then the bear's behavior wasn't just unusual animal instinct. It was something supernatural, something that had been drawing grieving mothers to protect vulnerable children for years. But that raised even more terrifying questions. What had happened to the other bears that had come to the hospital? And what did Dr. Vasquez plan to do about the bear that had just escaped into the tunnels? As if reading her thoughts, Dr. Vasquez raised the tranquilizer gun again. I'm sorry, Riley, but I can't let this continue. The bear may have helped tonight, but it's still a wild animal, and now it knows how to get into the hospital. If it comes back, someone could get hurt. No, Riley said firmly, surprising herself with the strength in her voice. You don't understand. That bear has a cub waiting for it at Mountain View Wildlife Sanctuary. It's not going to come back here. It's going to find its own baby. Dr. Vasquez paused, her expression changing from determination to uncertainty. What did you say? Riley quickly explained about the missing persons report, about the cub that was alive and waiting for its mother. As she spoke, she saw Dr. Vasquez's grip on the tranquilizer gun loosen. If that's true, Dr. Vasquez said slowly, then this situation is different from the others. The other bears, they had no cubs to return to. They stayed in the area, becoming increasingly dangerous as their protective instincts focused on the hospital. Riley felt a chill run down her spine. What happened to them? Dr. Vasquez was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. We had to put them down, all of them. Because once they bonded with the children here, they couldn't let go. They became guardians that couldn't be reasoned with or relocated. The weight of this revelation settled on Riley like a crushing burden. The bear that had saved baby Mia's life was walking into the same trap that had claimed the lives of others before it. Unless it could truly find its cub and break the supernatural connection to the hospital, it would be doomed to the same fate. We have to help it, Riley said desperately. We have to make sure it reaches the sanctuary. Dr. Vasquez looked at her with an expression of deep sadness. Riley, even if we wanted to help, it's too late. The officers outside aren't just here to capture one bear. They're part of a specialized unit that's been tracking the pattern of incidents at this hospital. They know about the supernatural connections, and they have orders to eliminate any bear that's been affected by them. Riley felt her heart sink as the full scope of the situation became clear. The bear that had shown such incredible compassion, that had risked its own life to protect baby Mia, was now hunted by people who saw it only as a supernatural threat to be eliminated. But as Riley stood there, holding the baby that the bear had saved, she realized that she couldn't let this end in tragedy. Not after witnessing such pure, selfless love. There had to be a way to save the bear and reunite it with its cub, even if it meant going against the very system she had served faithfully for 8 years. "Dr. Vasquez," Riley said, her voice stronger than she felt. "What if there's another way? What if we could break the supernatural connection before the bear becomes trapped like the others?" Dr. Vasquez studied Riley's face carefully. "What are you suggesting?" "The bear's cub is alive. If we could somehow get them reunited before the supernatural bond becomes permanent, maybe the bear's natural maternal instincts would override whatever force is at work here." Before Dr. Vasquez could respond, the sound of static filled the air. Riley's radio crackled to life, but the voice that came through wasn't Dr. Vance or Jake. It was someone Riley had never heard before, speaking in urgent, clipped tones. "All units, we have movement in the underground tunnels. The target is heading toward the loading dock. Repeat, target is moving toward the loading dock. Teams 3 and 4. Intercept immediately." Riley's blood ran cold. They were tracking the bear through the tunnels somehow, which meant it was walking straight into another trap. But how were they monitoring the underground passages? Dr. Vasquez saw the horror on Riley's face and sighed deeply. "Heat sensors," she explained quietly. "The hospital installed them throughout the tunnel system after the second incident. We couldn't risk another bear using the tunnels to access different parts of the building undetected." "So they know exactly where it is," Riley said, feeling hopeless. "Yes, and they'll be waiting for it when it reaches the exit." Baby Mia stirred in Riley's arms, making soft sounds that reminded Riley of the bear's gentle chuffing. The warming blanket the bear had given them was keeping the infant comfortable, but Riley could see that the baby needed proper medical attention soon. "Dr. Vasquez," Riley said desperately, "there has to be something we can do. That bear saved this baby's life. It showed more compassion than most humans would in the same situation." Dr. Vasquez was quiet for a long moment, staring at the tranquilizer gun in her hands. When she looked up, Riley saw something unexpected in her eyes. Doubt. "You said the cub is at Mountain View Wildlife Sanctuary?" Dr. Vasquez asked. "Yes. According to the report, it's been crying for its mother for 3 days. It's injured but recovering." Dr. Vasquez made a decision that surprised Riley. Instead of raising the tranquilizer gun, she set it down on a shelf and pulled out her cell phone. "I'm calling Dr. Sarah Chen at the sanctuary," she said. "If what you're saying is true, if there really is a cub waiting for its mother, then maybe we can find a way to end this cycle of tragedy." Riley watched in amazement as Dr. Vasquez dialed the number. But their moment of hope was shattered by the sound of gunshots echoing through the building. Not tranquilizer guns, but real weapons. Someone was shooting to kill. "No!" Riley cried out, startling baby Mia, who began to cry. Dr. Vasquez's phone call connected just as more gunshots rang out. "Sarah, this is Elena Vasquez at Pine Valley Medical. I need to know about a bear cub you have there." "What? You can hear gunshots through the phone?" Riley could hear a woman's voice on the other end of the line, sounding alarmed and confused. Dr. Vasquez quickly explained the situation while Riley tried to comfort baby Mia, whose cries seemed to echo the pain Riley felt in her own heart. "Sarah says the cub has been inconsolable," Dr. Vasquez said after a brief conversation. "It won't eat, won't sleep properly. It keeps making distress calls that they've never heard from a bear cub before." More gunshots echoed through the building, followed by the sound of shouting. Riley felt tears streaming down her face as she realized they were too late. The bear that had shown such incredible love was being hunted down like a dangerous animal. But then, something unexpected happened. Dr. Vasquez's phone rang, and when she answered it, her expression changed from resignation to shock. "What do you mean they missed?" she said into the phone. How does a 700-pound bear just disappear? Riley's heart leaped with hope. Maybe the bear had found another way out. Maybe it had managed to escape the trap after all. The tunnels branch off in directions we didn't map, Dr. Vasquez explained to Riley after hanging up. Some of them connect to old mining shafts that predate the hospital. If the bear found one of those passages, it could be anywhere by now. But their relief was short-lived. Jake's voice came over the radio, sounding panicked. "All medical staff, we have an emergency in the East Wing. A patient has gone missing from room 314, and there are signs of a struggle. Security is requesting immediate assistance." Riley and Dr. Vasquez looked at each other with growing alarm. Room 314 was in the pediatric ward. If the bear had somehow accessed that area of the hospital, and if it had encountered a child, "We have to get there," Riley said, but Dr. Vasquez shook her head. "You need to stay with baby Mia. She's your responsibility, and she still needs medical attention. I'll go check on the situation in the East Wing." Dr. Vasquez picked up her tranquilizer gun and headed for the door, but she paused before leaving. "Riley, if what you said about the cub is true, if there's really a chance to reunite them, then I want you to know that I hope you're right. I'm tired of being part of a system that kills magnificent creatures just because we don't understand them." After Dr. Vasquez left, Riley found herself alone with baby Mia in the storage room. The gunshots had stopped, but the shouting continued, and she could hear people running through the hallways above them. Baby Mia had calmed down, but Riley could see that the infant was getting cold again without the bear's warmth. The warming blanket was helping, but it wasn't enough. Riley realized she needed to get the baby back to the nurse's station where she could provide proper care. As she prepared to leave the storage room, Riley noticed something that made her heart stop. On the floor near the tunnel entrance were wet paw prints leading away from the opening, but there was something wrong with them. Mixed in with the bear's tracks were smaller prints, human footprints, child-sized footprints. Riley's mind raced as she tried to process what she was seeing. The bear hadn't just escaped through the tunnels. It had taken someone with it. A child from room 314. But as Riley looked more closely at the prints, she realized something that changed everything. The child's footprints weren't being dragged or forced. They were walking alongside the bear's prints, as if the child was following willingly. Riley's radio crackled again, and this time it was Dr. Vance's voice, filled with confusion and wonder. "This is Dr. Vance in the East Wing. I need to report something unusual. 7-year-old Tommy Rodriguez from room 314 is missing, but his mother says he wasn't taken. She says he left on his own, following what he called the sad mama bear who needed help finding her baby." Riley felt goosebumps rise on her arms. A 7-year-old child had somehow seen the bear, understood its pain, and decided to help it. But that meant both the bear and the child were now somewhere in the maze of tunnels beneath the hospital, possibly lost and definitely in danger. The radio continued with more updates. "Tommy's mother says he's been talking about dreams of a lost bear family for the past 3 nights. She thought they were just nightmares, but now she thinks he was somehow sensing the bear's presence before it even arrived at the hospital." Riley's understanding of the situation shifted once again. The supernatural connection that Dr. Vasquez had mentioned wasn't just affecting the bears. It was also touching the children in the hospital, creating bonds of empathy that transcended normal human experience. But this new development made the situation infinitely more complex. The authorities outside weren't just hunting a bear anymore. They were dealing with a missing child who had voluntarily gone with a wild animal. The response would be massive and immediate. Riley made a decision that went against every protocol she had ever learned. She was going to leave her post and follow the tracks into the tunnels. She couldn't abandon baby Mia, but she also couldn't let a 7-year-old child and a grieving mother bear face whatever dangers lay ahead without help. Wrapping baby Mia securely in the warming blanket, Riley grabbed a flashlight from the storage room supplies and headed toward the tunnel entrance. She knew she was risking her career, possibly her life, but she also knew that she was the only person in the hospital who truly understood what the bear was trying to do. The tunnel was dark and cold, with a musty smell that spoke of decades of disuse. Riley's flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing the dual set of tracks leading deeper into the underground maze. The bear's prints were heavy and deliberate, while the child's footsteps seemed eager, almost excited. As Riley followed the tracks, she began to hear something that made her heart race. Echoing through the tunnels ahead of her was the sound of a child's voice, not crying or screaming, but talking in soft, comforting tones. "It's okay, Mama Bear," the voice said, distant but clear in the tunnel acoustics. "I know where your baby is. My mommy told me about the sanctuary place. We can find your little one together." Riley's eyes filled with tears as she realized what was happening. 7-year-old Tommy Rodriguez wasn't just helping the bear escape. He was guiding it toward its cub, using knowledge he had somehow absorbed from overheard conversations or his supernatural connection to the bear's pain. But the tunnels were dangerous, full of old shafts and unstable areas that could collapse without warning. A child and a bear, no matter how well-intentioned their mission, could easily become lost or trapped in the underground labyrinth. Riley picked up her pace, following the tracks and the sound of Tommy's voice deeper into the darkness. Baby Mia remained quiet in her arms, as if she understood the importance of their mission. As they moved through the tunnels, Riley began to notice something strange about the air around them. It felt warmer, almost charged with energy. The supernatural force that Dr. Vasquez had mentioned seemed to be stronger down here, in the foundations of the hospital. Then Riley heard something that made her stop in her tracks. Mixed in with Tommy's voice was another sound, a deep, gentle chuffing that she recognized immediately. The bear was responding to the child, communicating with him in ways that shouldn't have been possible. But even more amazing was what she heard next. A third voice, much smaller and higher pitched, a sound that could only be coming from a bear cub. Riley's flashlight beam caught something ahead in the tunnel that made her gasp. There, in a wider section of the passage, was the mother bear. Beside her was Tommy Rodriguez, his small hand resting fearlessly on the bear's thick fur. And nestled between them, somehow impossibly present in the underground tunnel, was a small bear cub with distinctive white markings on its chest. The cub from Mountain View Wildlife Sanctuary was here, 15 miles from where it should have been, reunited with its mother in the depths beneath Pine Valley Medical Center. Riley stood frozen, trying to process what she was seeing. How had the cub gotten here? How had it traveled 15 miles through wilderness to find its mother in an underground tunnel? But as she watched the reunion between mother and cub, as she saw Tommy's face glowing with joy at having helped bring a family back together, Riley realized that she was witnessing something far beyond normal understanding. The supernatural force that connected this place wasn't just about protection or supernatural bonds. It was about healing, about bringing separated families back together against all odds. The question now was whether the authorities above ground would see this miracle for what it truly was, or whether they would destroy it in their fear of what they couldn't understand. Riley stepped forward slowly, her flashlight beam dancing across the incredible scene before her. The mother bear looked up at her approach, but there was no fear or aggression in those dark eyes. Instead, Riley saw recognition, gratitude, and something that looked almost like relief. Tommy Rodriguez turned toward Riley, his young face beaming with joy despite the dirt streaks and the fact that he was wearing only his hospital gown and slippers in the cold tunnel. "Miss Riley," Tommy said excitedly, apparently recognizing her from her visits to the pediatric ward. "Look, I found the mama bear's baby. They're together again, just like in my dreams." Riley's heart swelled with emotion as she watched the mother bear gently nuzzle her cub, making soft sounds that spoke of overwhelming love and relief. The cub, no larger than a medium-sized dog, pressed against its mother's chest, making tiny mewing sounds that echoed through the tunnel. "Tommy, how did you know to come down here?" Riley asked, kneeling down to his level while still holding baby Mia securely. "The mama bear was so sad," Tommy explained, his 7-year-old voice filled with the simple wisdom that children sometimes possess. "I could feel it in my tummy, like when my little sister cries. She kept calling for her baby, but nobody could hear her except me." Riley looked at the bear family, then back at Tommy. "But how did the cub get here? It was supposed to be at the wildlife sanctuary." Tommy's expression grew thoughtful. "I don't know exactly, but when I was following the mama bear through the tunnels, I started hearing the baby calling back. And then we found this big room with lights, and the baby was just there, waiting." Riley's flashlight beam followed Tommy's pointing finger deeper into the tunnel, where she could see a soft glow coming from what appeared to be a larger chamber. Her curiosity overrode her caution as she moved toward the light source, the bear family and Tommy following behind her. What Riley found in the chamber took her breath away. It was clearly an old mining cavern, but it had been transformed into something extraordinary. The walls were covered with paintings, ancient-looking artwork that depicted bears and humans living together in harmony. The light was coming from some kind of natural phosphorescence in the rock, creating an almost magical atmosphere. But what shocked Riley most were the dozens of small objects scattered throughout the chamber. Children's toys, baby blankets, small clothes, and medical bracelets. All items that looked like they had been left by children over many years. "Tommy," Riley said slowly, "have other children been down here before?" Before Tommy could answer, the mother bear moved to one wall of the chamber and began making soft, chuffing sounds toward a particular section of the paintings. Riley followed the bear's gaze and gasped when she saw what had captured the animal's attention. The painting showed a scene that was eerily similar to what had happened in the hospital that night. A large bear protecting a human infant, while a small human figure stood nearby, offering help. But this painting looked ancient, far older than the hospital above them. "This place," Riley whispered, understanding beginning to dawn on her. "This place has been connecting bears and humans for much longer than anyone realized." Tommy nodded seriously. "The lady in my dreams told me about it. She said this is where the sad mamas come to find their babies, and where the lost babies come to find their mamas. She said it's been happening for a really, really long time." "What lady?" Riley asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to hear the answer. "The lady with the white hair and the kind eyes. She visits me sometimes when I'm scared at night. She tells me stories about the bears and the people who used to live here together." Riley felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold air in the chamber. Tommy was describing encounters with what could only be described as a spirit or ghost. Someone who had been guiding children to this place for generations. The sound of distant voices and footsteps echoing through the tunnels reminded Riley that they weren't safe, even in this magical place. The authorities were searching for Tommy, and they wouldn't stop until they found him. "Tommy, we need to get you back to your mom," Riley said gently. "She's very worried about you." "But what about the bear family?" Tommy asked, looking distressed. "The men with guns want to hurt them. I heard them talking." Riley looked at the mother bear, who seemed to understand their conversation even though she couldn't comprehend the words. The bear's intelligent eyes showed awareness of the danger, but also determination to protect her cub at all costs. Then baby Mia, who had been quietly observing everything from Riley's arms, made a soft sound that caused both the mother bear and her cub to look directly at her. The baby reached out her tiny hand toward the bear family, and Riley was amazed to see the mother bear very gently extend her snout to touch the infant's fingers. In that moment, Riley realized that baby Mia had been part of this supernatural connection all along. The bear hadn't just happened upon a cold baby in need of warmth. The infant had somehow called to the grieving mother, drawing her to the hospital through the same mysterious force that had brought Tommy to the tunnels. "They're all connected," Riley said softly, understanding flooding through her. "Baby Mia, Tommy, the bear family, even me, we're all part of something bigger." The sounds in the tunnels were getting closer, and Riley knew they had to make a decision quickly. They could try to hide deeper in the chamber, but eventually they would be found. They could attempt to explain what had happened, but who would believe such an incredible story? Then the mother bear did something that solved their dilemma in a way Riley never could have imagined. The massive animal moved to a section of the chamber wall that looked different from the rest. Instead of paintings, this area was covered with what appeared to be ancient symbols carved directly into the rock. The bear pressed her paw against one of the symbols, and to Riley's amazement the wall began to move. It was a hidden passage, concealed so well that it would have been impossible to find without knowing exactly where to look. "How did you know about that?" Riley asked the bear, though she didn't expect an answer. Tommy piped up instead. "The lady in my dreams showed me all the secret places. She said the bears remember things that people forget. Their mamas teach them about the safe paths, just like our mamas teach us about staying safe." The hidden passage revealed another tunnel, but this one was different. It sloped upward and felt warmer, with fresh air flowing through it. Riley could see natural light filtering down from somewhere ahead, suggesting that this passage led to the outside world. But as they prepared to leave the chamber, Riley heard something that made her heart race with fear. Multiple sets of footsteps were approaching their location, and they were moving fast. The search team had found the chamber. "Everyone, move quickly but quietly," Riley whispered, ushering Tommy toward the hidden passage while the bear family followed close behind. They had just entered the secret tunnel when bright flashlight beams flooded the chamber behind them. Riley heard voices, some surprised and others frustrated, as the search team discovered the ancient paintings and children's belongings. "Sir, you need to see this," one voice said. "This place is incredible. These paintings look like they could be hundreds of years old." "I don't care about cave paintings," another voice replied harshly. "Where's the child? Where's the bear?" Riley and her unlikely group moved as quickly as they could through the upward sloping tunnel. Baby Mia remained calm and quiet, as if she understood the need for silence. Tommy stayed close to the mother bear, his small hand resting on her fur for comfort and guidance. The cub walked between its mother and Tommy, creating a living bridge between the human and bear worlds. As they climbed higher, Riley began to hear something wonderful: birds singing, the sound of wind in trees. They were approaching the outside world, and with it, potential freedom for the bear family. But Riley also knew that their emergence from the tunnels would only be the beginning of their challenges. The authorities would continue searching for Tommy, and they would never stop hunting the bears unless something fundamental changed about how people understood what had happened that night. The tunnel finally opened onto a small clearing deep in the forest, surrounded by tall pine trees and hidden from any roads or buildings. The early morning sun was just beginning to filter through the canopy, creating a peaceful, almost sacred atmosphere. Tommy immediately ran to a fallen log and sat down, patting the space beside him as if inviting the bear family to join him. The mother bear and her cub settled next to the little boy, creating a scene that looked like something from a fairy tale. Riley sat down nearby, still holding baby Mia, and tried to process everything that had happened. In the space of one night, her entire understanding of the world had been turned upside down. She had witnessed supernatural connections between species, discovered an ancient chamber that suggested these events had been happening for generations, and somehow become part of a group that included a talking child, a telepathic baby, and a bear family that defied all natural behavior. But their peaceful moment was shattered by the sound of helicopters in the distance. The search had expanded beyond the hospital and tunnels. They were now hunting through the entire forest, and it was only a matter of time before they found the clearing. "We can't stay here," Riley said, looking around for options. "They'll find us soon." Tommy looked up at her with his bright, innocent eyes. "The lady in my dreams said this would happen. She said we have to take the bear family to the place where the water sings and the mountains touch the sky. She said that's where they'll be safe." Riley had no idea what Tommy was talking about, but the mother bear seemed to understand. The massive animal stood up and began moving toward a barely visible path that led deeper into the forest. Her cub followed immediately, and Tommy jumped up to walk beside them. "Riley, come on," Tommy called back. "We have to hurry before the loud birds find us." Riley looked down at baby Mia, who was gazing up at her with those wise infant eyes that seemed to hold ancient knowledge. The baby made a soft sound that Riley could swear sounded like encouragement. Against every rational thought in her head, Riley stood up and followed Tommy and the bear family into the deep forest. She was a nurse, trained to follow protocols and procedures, but she was also a human being who had witnessed something miraculous. She couldn't let that miracle be destroyed by people who refused to understand it. As they walked deeper into the wilderness, Riley realized that she was no longer just trying to protect a bear family or return a lost child to his mother. She had become part of something ancient and powerful, something that connected all mothers and children across the boundaries of species and understanding. The question now was whether their faith in that connection would be strong enough to overcome the very real dangers that were hunting them through the forest. The sound of the helicopters was getting closer, and Riley knew that their journey to find safety had only just begun. As they walked deeper into the wilderness, following paths that seemed to appear just when they needed them, Riley began to notice something extraordinary happening around them. Other animals were joining their procession. A family of deer emerged from the trees, walking parallel to their group. A pair of hawks circled overhead, as if providing aerial protection. Even smaller creatures like rabbits and squirrels seemed to be guiding them toward their mysterious destination. Tommy noticed it too. "Look, Riley, all the forest friends are helping us. The lady in my dreams said this would happen when the time was right." The mother bear seemed completely at ease with this growing parade of wildlife. She moved with confidence, following instincts that had been passed down through countless generations of her kind. Her cub stayed close, occasionally tumbling playfully but always keeping pace with the group. Baby Mia had been remarkably quiet throughout their journey, but now she began making soft sounds that seemed to harmonize with the natural symphony around them. Riley realized the infant was somehow communicating with the forest itself. After what felt like hours of walking, they reached the crest of a small mountain. Before them lay a sight that took Riley's breath away. A hidden valley stretched out below, filled with the most beautiful lake she had ever seen. The water was crystal clear, reflecting the mountains that rose majestically on all sides. And from somewhere within the valley came a sound like music. The water was indeed singing as it flowed over ancient rocks and through natural channels. The place where the water sings and the mountains touch the sky, Tommy said with wonder. We made it. But what amazed Riley most was what she saw around the lake. There were bears everywhere. Not just any bears, but families. Mothers with cubs, fathers teaching young ones to fish, elderly bears resting in the warm sunlight. This was a sanctuary that existed outside of human knowledge, a place where bears had been gathering for generations, and walking among them, completely at peace, were people. Adults and children of all ages, all living in harmony with the bear families. Riley realized she was looking at the continuation of the ancient connection she had discovered in the chamber below the hospital. An elderly woman with white hair and kind eyes approached them as they descended into the valley. Riley's heart skipped as she recognized the description Tommy had given of the lady in his dreams. "Welcome," the woman said, her voice carrying the wisdom of countless years. "I am Sarah Whitewing, guardian of this valley. We have been waiting for you." Tommy ran to the woman and hugged her tightly. "You're real. You're really real." Sarah smiled and looked at Riley with eyes that seemed to see everything. "You have done something very brave, Nurse Riley Chen. You chose love over fear, understanding over protocol. That is why you were chosen to be part of this journey." "Chosen?" Riley asked, still holding baby Mia close. "The connections you witnessed tonight don't happen randomly," Sarah explained. "They occur when the world needs to remember that love transcends all boundaries. You, Tommy, baby Mia, and this bear family have reminded everyone who will hear your story that compassion is the most powerful force in existence." The mother bear and her cub had found other bears to greet them, but they stayed close to Tommy and Riley. The bond they had formed wouldn't be broken by their arrival in this sanctuary. Sarah reached out and gently touched baby Mia's forehead. The infant looked up at her and smiled, making soft cooing sounds that seemed to delight the elderly woman. "This little one called across species lines to save herself and bring a family back together," Sarah said. "She will grow up knowing that love has no boundaries." Riley looked around the valley, seeing families both human and bear playing together, sharing meals, caring for each other's young. "How long has this place existed?" "Since the beginning," Sarah replied, "long before hospitals and cities, before people forgot that we are all connected. This valley exists in the spaces between worlds, accessible only to those whose hearts are open to true understanding." The sound of helicopters echoed faintly from beyond the mountains, but it seemed distant and unimportant now. Riley realized that no one would find this valley unless they were meant to. "What happens now?" Riley asked. Sarah smiled. "Now you choose. You can return to your old life, carrying this knowledge in your heart but keeping it secret. Or you can stay and help us bridge the gap between your world and ours. Help us teach others that the connection you witnessed tonight is possible for everyone." Riley looked at Tommy, who was now playing with the bear cub, while its mother watched contentedly. She looked at baby Mia, who seemed more alert and alive than she had ever been. She thought about Dr. Vasquez and Jake, about all the people at the hospital who could benefit from understanding what she had learned. "I want to go back," Riley said finally. "But not to hide what happened. I want to tell people about this place, about what's possible when we choose love over fear." Sarah nodded approvingly. "That is exactly what I hoped you would say. The world is ready to remember these old truths, but it needs brave souls like you to help teach them." As if summoned by their conversation, Dr. Vasquez emerged from behind a cluster of trees, walking hand in hand with a small bear cub. Behind her came Jake, his eyes wide with wonder as he took in the incredible scene around him. "Riley!" Dr. Vasquez called out. When we followed your trail and found ourselves here, I couldn't believe my eyes. This place, these connections, they're everything I hoped existed, but never dared to believe." Jake was speechless, but his face showed pure joy as he watched the harmony between humans and bears throughout the valley. "We all followed our hearts," Sarah explained. "The same force that guided Riley and Tommy brought Dr. Vasquez and Jake here when they chose to trust rather than fear." Over the following hours, Riley watched as more people arrived in the valley. Tommy's parents, who had been led by dreams of their own. Several nurses from the hospital who had felt inexplicably drawn to search the forest. Even some of the officials who had been hunting the bears, but who had somehow found themselves putting down their weapons and opening their hearts instead. As the sun set over the mountains, painting the singing waters in shades of gold and pink, Riley sat beside the lake holding baby Mia. The mother bear and her cub rested nearby, and Tommy had fallen asleep against the mother bear's warm fur. Riley realized that what had started as a simple night shift had become the most important experience of her life. She had witnessed the power of love to transcend every boundary, to heal every separation, to bring together what the world insisted must remain apart. Baby Mia looked up at her and smiled, making a soft sound that Riley now understood was the infant's way of saying, "Thank you." Not just for the warmth and protection, but for believing in something magical when the whole world said it was impossible. As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Riley made a promise to herself, to baby Mia, and to the bear family that had taught her so much. She would spend the rest of her life helping others discover the connections that existed all around them, waiting only for open hearts to recognize them. The mother bear looked at Riley one last time before settling down for the night with her cub safe beside her. In those dark, intelligent eyes, Riley saw gratitude, peace, and something else. A promise that their story would continue, that the connections forged that night would ripple outward, touching lives in ways they couldn't yet imagine. And in the valley where the water sang and the mountains touched the sky, surrounded by families both human and bear, Riley understood that she had witnessed something that would change the world, not through force or fear, but through the simple, powerful truth that love knows no boundaries. The last thing Riley heard before drifting off to sleep was the gentle sound of the singing water, carrying their story to the wind, spreading the message that in a world often divided by fear, love had once again proven to be the strongest force of all. Baby Mia slept peacefully in her arms, dreaming of warm bear hugs and a future where all children would grow up knowing that they were connected to every living thing by invisible threads of compassion.